LBC. From Global, leading Britain's conversation, the Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, dramatic 24 hours in the Brexit negotiations. Last night, the chief negotiator for Brussels, Monsieur Barnier, calls together the other 27 ambassadors. At the same time, the Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, flies off to Brussels. According to the German press, the deal had been done. And yet, after an hour, Dominic Raab, the Brexit Secretary, left, and there was no deal. Did Barnier push too hard? Did he go a step further by wanting a backstop on the backstop? I know you couldn't invent some of this stuff, could you? Or is it that Dominic Raab and his boss Theresa May had seen over the course of the weekend some of the things that were being said by the DUP, by Jacob Rees-Mogg, by David Davis? Is it that they decided, actually, do you know what, we've got to show a little bit of muscle here? Either way, unannounced until early this morning, the Prime Minister gave a statement to the House of Commons this afternoon. She told us that she believes a deal is still achievable this week.
Of course, it is frustrating that almost all of the remaining points of disagreement are focused on how we manage a scenario which both sides hope should never come to pass, and which, if it does, will only be temporary. We cannot let this disagreement derail the prospects of a good deal and leave us with the no-deal outcome that no one wants. I continue to believe that a negotiated deal is the best outcome for the UK and for the European Union. I continue to believe that such a deal is achievable, and that is the spirit in which I will continue to work with our European partners.
Bear in mind, this week is the deadline for agreeing the terms upon which we leave, and the hope is that we'll come back in November, at least the government's hope, and start to talk about what a future promissory framework looks like. But she did today reiterate that in answer to the Irish border question raised so repeatedly by Monsieur Barnier, that she still believed that the United Kingdom as a whole should stay in the customs union until at least the end of 2021.
Creating any form of customs border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK would mean a fundamental change in the day-to-day experience for businesses in Northern Ireland, with the potential to affect jobs and investment. We published our proposals on customs in the backstop in June, and after Salzburg I said we would bring forward our own further proposals, and that's what we've done in these negotiations. And the European Union have responded positively by agreeing to explore a UK-wide customs solution to this backstop.
So you see, the controversial customs union that she wants, that her Eurosceptics still hate, she talks about the fact that the European Union have been responding positively, I'm not surprised, to that idea. And then she talked about the backstop and the need for it not to be permanent.
Second, Mr. Speaker, I need to be able to look the British people in the eye and say this backstop is a temporary solution. People are rightly concerned that what is only meant to be temporary could become a permanent limbo, with no new relationship between the UK and the EU ever agreed. I'm clear we are not going to be trapped permanently in a single customs territory, unable to do meaningful trade deals.
Well, let's get the gossip, shall we, from the Westminster corridors. Let's see how have those people that were lining up, 63 of her backbenchers read a letter to the newspapers yesterday. Let's see how the sceptics and the rebels have responded to the Prime Minister's statement. I'm going to go and speak to Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor. Theo, how's this speech gone down?
Very badly, in all quarters, because of course the Brexiteers, Nigel, don't trust the Prime Minister when she comes out today in the House of Commons and says she's standing up for Britain, that she doesn't want to see a border down the middle of the Irish Sea. And then the DUP, the Ulster Unionists, they don't believe that Theresa May is standing up for them when she says she doesn't want to see a border down the middle of the Irish Sea. And then the Remainer, Dominic Grieve, stood up in the House of Commons and used language that, well, you might use, or Jacob Rees-Mogg might use, or Boris Johnson might use, and said Britain would be turned into a vassal state if Theresa May agrees to this deal, and that the only way he'd support it is if Britain was given a second referendum. Theresa May went out today and she tried to please everybody and ended up pleasing nobody.
Which is pretty much the story of the last 2 years, Theo, in many, many ways. Well, I should be with them, as soon as this show's over, I'm going to be with Sammy Wilson, who, of course, is the DUP's Brexit spokesman. Are we at a point here in your opinion, Theo, where the DUP, her own cabinet, her own backbenchers, I mean, could this be her last week as Prime Minister?
There is talk of it, Nigel. There is talk of it. And Theresa May, we learned at the weekend, is only 4 letters away from that threshold of 48 being reached from Conservative MPs to trigger a no confidence vote. The problem is she's used up all of her political capital. She didn't think that she could get her proposal through, and this is a suspicion of Brexiteers, she didn't think that she could get that proposal through Cabinet tomorrow and then would be seen to bounce it onto the European Council on Wednesday evening. Therefore, she sent Dominic Raab, her Brexit secretary, over to pull the plug to a deal that actually Ollie Robbins, her chief negotiator, who is answerable to her because he obviously split from David Davis when he was Brexit secretary. So nobody actually believes what she's trying to do. They see this whole thing as a charade, and then it has the added impact, the added bonus from Theresa May's point of view, of course, by continuing the charade on until December, you shorten the amount of time that she has to actually present it to Parliament and for MPs to get to say. One thing that was interesting today, though, Nigel, was that she said if there is no deal, then that is going to be an option that is presented to the House of Commons to vote on.
Yes.
That won't, I don't think, will go down particularly well in
knowing full well,
for
of
you
course.
and
no, well, of course.
They won't allow it to happen.
No. I mean, no deal was the default position. We thought if there wasn't a deal, but she's now making it clear that in the event of no deal, it comes back to the House of Commons, who would probably vote for another referendum. Theo, thank you. Don't run away too far this week. We're going to need you. Thank you. Well, folks, you've heard that analysis. It's gone down like a lead balloon. Do you think a deal this week is still achievable or desirable? And if you're confident an arrangement's going to be met, call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think actually no deal is better than what she's proposing, in which case text to 84850. And if she does get a deal, will Parliament accept it? Let me know by tweeting using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch us on Facebook. I'm broadcasting here from Bournemouth, where there'll be a Eurosceptic rally taking place this evening. Let me just tell you this. The fact that she's reiterated her position on us staying in a customs union, on us being at least until the end of 2021 a rule taker without any say whatsoever, getting back no control of our borders, giving away £39 billion in the hope we might get a good deal in the future. This whole thing, I tell you what, I don't want a deal this week on these terms. I'd much rather we had no deal this week and then either thought about a sensible free trade deal along the Canada lines, or we left on a WTO deal. I feel pretty strongly about this. Chris is calling from Twickenham. Good evening, Chris.
Hello, Nigel. How are you?
I'm well. Well, lots of theatrics in the last 24 hours. When she says a deal's achievable, is she right, Chris?
I don't think she's going to get a deal that's going to please everyone. I get a deal with the European Union, but then she's got to put it past her backbenchers and the DUP. But there's a fundamental problem here, Nigel, which is that people like you, for a long, long time, pretended the Northern Irish problem wasn't an issue. Even 3 weeks ago, you were saying on your show that no one mentioned the Good Friday Agreement at all before the referendum, which is a blatant lie.
They didn't. I didn't hear it once. Do you know what? I did hundreds of debates on radio and television and all around the country. I think the Prime Minister, Cameron, mentioned it once. I wasn't asked a single question about it.
Hang on,
Actually, up until months after the referendum, it wasn't a problem because the Irish Taoiseach at that time, Enda Kenny, wasn't causing a problem. It was when there was a new Taoiseach in Ireland and Barnier started to use this as his opportunity.
Well, that is a blatant lie.
Sorry, what's a lie?
They went to Belfast a week before the referendum. You're an absolute liar.
Oh, dear. Now, Chris, can you give me one piece of evidence where I was even asked a question on this at any point in the run-up to in the 25 years up to the referendum?
Hello?
Yeah, I'm saying I wasn't asked about it once in 25 years.
But that's not the point. I just told you what you said 3 weeks ago was a blatant lie. 2 former prime ministers go to Belfast to discuss the issue. It was all over the TV news.
Well, two former prime ministers.
That's irrelevant, is it?
I wasn't asked a single question on it. I heard David Cameron mention it once. As I say, it wasn't an issue until well after. And you know something, Chris? If the argument is you need a hard border because there are differences between the north of Ireland and the Republic, well, put one in right now. Because right now, today, there's a different currency, different excise duties, different taxation rates on both personal and corporate.
No, but that's another myth you're making here, because the point is at the moment we have the same regulatory standards. As Nick Ferrari even said this morning, once you leave the European Union, any Chinese manufacturer wants to send their poor quality toys which don't meet European Union standards into the south of Ireland, they go straight through the border. You know that what you're saying is blatant.
We are not, Chris, we're going to be a banana republic, are we? And give up on our standards because we leave the EU.
It's not about that. The point is the former head of the WTO said quite clearly that if you leave with no deal, you have to enforce your borders. You have to check to make sure the goods. It's not about tariffs, it's about making sure they meet standards.
Do you know what, Chris? Already we have enforcement on that border because of smuggling. Let's move on. Chris doesn't agree at all. He thinks it's a real issue. What does John in Glasgow think?
The deadline this week is another European Union deadline. We need to stay cool, calm and collected and carry on because we're well positioned. The fact of the matter is that Mrs May's election last June, that was her attempt to get a thumping majority to get Brexit in name only. She could have ignored the DUP, she could have ignored their own levers, and we would have been leaving in name only by now.
Yeah, but is leaving in name only good enough, John?
No, but that's what she would have railroaded through if she had got her Brexit means Brexit majority last June. Fortunately, she didn't get it, because that's what would have been stuck with by now. Right now, she can't do that, because she has to bear in mind that her own levers and the DUP and the people who have the problem with the Irish border is in actual fact Southern Ireland. If you look at any map, if there is no deal, where does it leave Southern Ireland? Totally detached, not even semi-detached from the yes to the European Union. The people who are sweating right now and should be sweating and wanting their 39 billion or whatever it is the European Union.
Yeah, so what do you think, John? Will she do a deal this week or not?
I think she should just wait until they come back with a begging bowl to the United Kingdom.
Well, she's going to a summit on Thursday. We'll see. She was supposed to go to a dinner on Wednesday, but apparently has been uninvited. Thank you very much indeed for that. Mark says, Theresa May has to go. She is weak and hasn't got the backbone. Marilyn says, they still have plenty of time. We can find a solution for Ireland. What will change in the next 2 years? Nothing. Marilyn, that's an argument for going into a transition zone or an implementation period, as she calls it. Danger is that goes on until the next general election in 2022. We then get a different government and we don't effectively leave the European Union at all. We have to grasp this, get on with it and do it now. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 6:15. Mrs May seeks to reassure the Commons about the breakdown of talks in Brussels last night, and it would appear finishes up pleasing nobody, not the Remainers or the Leavers. Is she going to get a deal this week? Is it desirable? I'm not even sure it is. I really can't think the deal that she's going for is in our national interest and represents anything like a true Brexit at all. Anton says by text, we just got to face up to it. We won't be leaving the European Union. It's a shame. We're missing a golden opportunity. It wouldn't be a shame, Anton. It'd be an outrage. Adrian says it's all smoke and mirrors to keep us in the EU. Well, I have to say, Adrian, you know, when she says to the Commons today, if it's a no deal, I'll bring it back to you, you do begin to wonder what some of her motives may be. What does Roy in Croydon make of it all? Good evening, Roy.
Oh, hello, Nigel. Yes, we have spoken before about this. Barney has already come out tonight and said there won't be a deal sorted out by the end of this week, so I think he's made that quite clear. But somebody made an interesting point today, Nigel, about this Irish border issue. Mm-hmm. Apparently, French Guinea borders Brazil.
Yes.
And it's a very, very big border crossing, much bigger than the Irish border issue. And Nigel, France is in the EU, Brazil is not in the EU. There are no checks. They're quite happy with it. Nobody bothers anyone.
Roy.
You know, how does that...
Roy, it's all bunkum, Roy, isn't it?
Really, isn't it?
I mean, we've already got a border. There are huge differences between the north and south. If there was tariff, yes, tariffs would need to be declared and collected. That's all done online. I mean, you know, Southampton... Every single day, thousands of containers come in from China. You know, we haven't got some little man opening them up and checking them all. It's all done online under the trusted trader scheme.
That's right. Just
Roy,
one more
it's
point,
crazy.
Nigel.
Yeah.
You've heard of this saying, divide and conquer. I think that's what they're trying to do now with this Northern Ireland issue. Split the UK up. And,
yeah, Mrs May says she won't allow the UK to be split up, and of course, given that she needs the DUP very badly to keep her in power, that's perhaps not surprising. But Roy, you know, and I said to the first caller tonight, he seemed very angry about this, this just wasn't really an issue until Barnier picked it up and got supported by the new Taoiseach Varadkar in Ireland. Roy, thank you. Dolores is calling from Twickenham. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Farage. I am sick and tired of every time we solve something, someone comes along and say, oh, but what about the Irish people? And what about this? I'm sick of them. Are they our jailers or are they our partners? But just walk out. Say hello, bye-bye, I'm off.
So when I was with Dolores, I was with Jacob Rees-Mogg on Saturday, and he said they're behaving like schoolyard bullies, and it's time we stood up to them. I mean, that's clearly how you feel too.
Yes, it is. And what about that short, what's-his-face? You keep mentioning his name. He does the old dealings.
Barnier.
Yeah, the reason why they don't want to make, because of the money, not because they like us. The other 27 countries are poor countries. We're the only ones. And anyway, why should we have someone to tell us what to do?
Well, that was the whole...
because they didn't win the war doesn't mean that they're going to...
Well, I don't know whether it goes back to the war, Dolores. Some people think it does. Either way, you've got a strong point, and a lot of people would agree with you. They look like bullies. They behaved at times in a very arrogant way. Dolores, thank you very much indeed for your point of view. Nick in Croydon, is there going to be a deal, Nick?
Yes, sooner or later, I'm sure. But I do wish the government would grow a set,
yes,
I should say, and actually stand up for themselves a little bit more. Mrs May has done a marvellous job trying to bend this way and that, and she keeps getting rebuffed back. Well, sooner or later, turn. These are our deals. What I would say she should do, these are our terms. We'd like a free trade agreement of some kind.
Yes.
Don't put any tariffs on our goods. We won't put any on yours. It's really very simple. Done.
Yeah.
The EU did a free trade agreement with the US in 24 hours.
Well, no, that's not.
Can be done.
Well, that's not quite true, Nick. I mean, the Canadian deal. The Canadian deal took a long time for them to negotiate. But the point is that we have exactly the same standards as them. So for us to do a Canada-style deal could be done very quickly. Nick, I'm with you. Why don't we go to them with one big generous offer and say, look, you sell us lots of cars and lots of wine. We're happy with that. Let's have a tariff-free deal. Let's get on with life. And Nick, quite why she wants to pay $39 billion for some promissory note about what may happen in a new trade deal afterwards, I simply don't know. My worry, Nick, is she's trapping us in until the next general election where we could get a change of government. Nick, I thank you. Ian in Oxford is a new caller to the show. Good evening, Ian.
Good evening, Nigel. I just want to thank you, actually, for all the work that you've been doing over the last few years and the sacrifice that you and others have made. But I wanted to ask you a question about the immigration, because the immigration was a big deal when the referendum was on. And I just wondered, with regard to Mrs May's plan, whether we are going to be going to have to carry on taking people in over the next 2 years during this period.
Nothing will change at all. She doesn't want anything to change. Nothing is going to change. The effective open door to Europe will continue. It's just something. They don't even want to talk about it. They feel embarrassed. They think it's awkward. Labour are no better, if not worse, and you are quite right. One of the absolutely big reasons people went out to vote was for us to be like 200 other countries in the world where we control our own borders, and they intend to do nothing about it.
Can I just ask one other question? There's something called Barcelona Declaration 1995 that's all over the internet at the moment. Is that... do you know anything about this?
I do, but I wouldn't get too hung up on that. I think the real agreement that matters, and there are lots of other things, David. Ian, that we could bring in. There's all sorts of demands I'm seeing today on tax and everything else. The basic thing is, if she continues on this course of keeping us in, whatever gets done in the next few days, but of keeping us in a customs union until the end of 2021. Do you think Parliament will stand by her or her own party vote her down?
Yes,
that's the big question. Thank you very much indeed for your call. David is calling from Virginia Water. Good evening.
Hello, Nigel. I'm one of your greatest fans. I find it so hard to get through to you. I just want to say what I said months and months ago.
Yep.
Theresa May doesn't want Brexit. And while you was never asked to help with the negotiations, you know more than anyone. about it, and they won't do it. Will be in name only, because you keep postponing it. And where's all these billions of pounds come from? Where does it come from?
You! Comes from people like you paying your taxes. Thank you. I'm sure she's very grateful to you.
She can't give money to anything else, can she? She can give the DUP whatever they ask to back her up.
Do you know, well, laugh or cry, I'm not sure at times, but, she gets up and says Brexit means Brexit. She gets up and says we're going to take back control of our money, our laws, our borders. I mean, does she, in your view, rate as one of the most dishonest prime ministers ever?
Yeah, the funny thing was her father's a vicar.
Yes.
She goes to church every Sunday. She's supposed to be a Christian. She's supposed to be honest, isn't she, Nigel? She's she's the weakest prime minister we've ever had.
Is she weak or dishonest?
Weak and dishonest.
Oh dear. That's not a great CV coming from Virginia Waters tonight, is it? David, I'm going to move on. Lots of people want to have their say on this. Carter is calling from Nottingham. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So does this direction of travel, and obviously there's more agreement to come on Northern Ireland if we're going to get a deal, is it desirable to go for this deal?
It's an absolute disgrace, actually. This woman's a complete disaster. Are the Tories blind? I mean, basically, she went into an election where she had a majority, and she cut her majority. And that's her track record. And now she's got into the Brexit negotiations, and she went with the country behind her. We voted her in, as the leader, and she's actually gone and stabbed us in the back. She's a disaster.
Do you think she was ever sincere about giving us the Brexit we voted for?
No, I think she was put into position deliberately as a backup to remain. Because if Cameron ever failed, then she was there lined up. If you look at how swiftly she was put into office, and how many MPs she had backing her, I was absolutely shocked. I mean, where did she come from? She was a dark horse.
It's a bit conspiratorial, Carter, isn't it?
I'm sorry, but you know what? Where there's smoke, there's always fire, mate.
Well, I tell you what, whether it is some great conspiracy, I doubt, but the fact that she says one thing and does the other again and again and again, I'm absolutely sick of it. Thank you for your call. I've been arguing, folks, as you know, they should have got rid of her back in July. I've also been arguing that it's kind of too late to get rid of her now because we're running out of time. But frankly, with what she's prepared to accept, with the direction of travel she wants to take us in, as far as I can see now, the sooner she's gotten rid of, the better. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 6:30. And after a breakdown in talks in Brussels last night, Theresa May comes to the House of Commons and makes an announcement, which wasn't pre-advertised, and says that a deal is still achievable. We've got to iron out some problems on the backstop to make sure that it's temporary and not permanent. But she also says that if there's no deal, she'll bring that back to the House of Commons for a vote, and we'd never heard that before. But is this deal that would keep us in a customs union, that would keep us as a rule taker with no say, and hand over £39 billion for the sort of vague promise, perhaps, of a trade deal in the future, is it a deal worth having? Is it desirable? I don't think so. Shirley says, Theresa the appeaser has to go. She's going to set us down the river. We need someone that believes in this country's independence, and she does not. Shirley, I'm afraid that is right. Jeff says, no deal, not an option. May has said it'll have to be voted on in Parliament. That means we would have a second referendum. Well, Jeff, that's pretty much what she was signalling today, wasn't it? Let's go to Woking and speak to Richard. Good evening.
Hello, Nigel. I think, basically, my experience is that the only way to deal with the EU is to make them more frightened of you than you are of them. And it is absolutely essential that we get out, and it's about time that most of the other EU member states got out too. I mean, back in the 1957, when the Rome Treaty was envisaged and adopted, the idea was that with the four pillars, the four freedoms, it's a kind of free-for-all. If you've got loads and loads of money, you can walk into any member state, buy up what you want, and run the place. And now it's got even worse, because in Malta, Bulgaria, and Cyprus,
they're selling passports,
in the EU, you can buy an EU passport. You've got plenty of money. You could be an ISIS person. You could be a drug dealer. You walk into any member state you like, buy their places up. look at the situation in the major cities in Germany and France and Britain and most other places. The best property is being grabbed by all sorts of people all over the world getting hold of an EU passport. We've got to get out of this, and there are plenty of people in the member states on the continent who think exactly like this.
Well, do you know, we've got one ace card, of course, that isn't being played, and it's this. The German car industry are terrified of us leaving on a no deal. They really worry what it'll do to their car sales in the United Kingdom, and the same goes, I mean, take champagne. You know, I know we're producing some great English sparkling whites ourselves, and this year's going to be a great year after the summer we had. But we buy nearly 20 million bottles of champagne as a country every single year. And this is the card we should have been playing from the beginning, but I don't see any evidence the government's even tried, Richard.
Yeah, well, harking back to the German car industry, let's be quite clear about this. It's very, very much more easy to, if you like, steer the Commission towards particular legislation that benefits your industry, especially when it was diesel. They've been found out by the Americans, basically, that they were pushing that, getting the checks made in their own factories rather than independently. This is probably one of the worst examples of how this project doesn't work in anybody's favour except big corporations. They got the legislation through the EU Commission that they wanted for diesels. It was all found out by the Americans, and now, you know, we've been poisoned for the last 5 years by diesel cars that were fake.
Big business gets its way. Do you, given the views that you've got, think the time has come now for the Conservative Party to bring her down as leader?
I think May's not done a bad job, actually, but she's not prepared to frighten them, and you've got to frighten them in some way. And if we had a strong leader in the Conservative Party who would actually go over there and frighten them, that would be the answer.
OK, I think I rather agree with that. Thank you. Luke is calling from Huddersfield, a new caller to the show. Luke, good evening.
Hi, Nigel, you all right?
Well, not really, no. I'm not. I just, every week goes by, this just gets worse. You know, Chequers was bad enough, and now she formally wants to keep us part, the whole of the UK, in a customs union for goodness knows how long. No, I'm not a happy bunny, Luke. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think she'll reach an agreement with the EU, but I think it's going to be a complete betrayal. She's going to roll over for Michel Barnier. We're going to be rule takers, and I think whether she gets it through Parliament remains to be seen, but something has to be done, and I think she has to be deposed imminently.
Well, you know, I remember 25 years ago at Maastricht, willing on the Maastricht rebels, who in the end were all bullied into voting for the government. They used the motion of confidence. The situation is slightly different now with the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, but the principle is much the same. But I've actually got some hope, Luke, that she'll be stopped. I think that the Eurosceptics now are much more determined than they were 25 years ago, and we have had a referendum on this. You know, the people of this country. Do you know what I was getting today? I was out there in the market this afternoon, down here in Christchurch in Dorset. And the one thing that came through to me again and again from people was, let's just get on with it. And that, I think, is the mood of the country. Let's just get on with it. Not just Brexit voters, but quite a few Remain voters too.
Yeah, I completely agree. Definitely.
Well, let's hope they do. Luke, thank you. Let's go to Croydon and speak to Barry. Hi, Barry.
Good evening.
So, do you want this deal that she's going for, Barry?
I mean, you're one of the biggest shysters in the whole of the.
Really, Barry. I mean, why do you have to sink to abuse without providing a fact or two?
I'll just say this then. You want WTO rules, don't you?
No, I want a Canada-style free. I want a Canada-style free trade deal, which I've been campaigning for, Barry, for a quarter of a century.
Fine. Okay. Well, many. Well, this is it in the Brexiteers. You can't agree amongst yourselves. Some want one thing. Some want something else.
No, Barry. Barry, we are united. We are united.
No,
we are united. We want a Canada-style deal. If the European Commission don't want that and want to bite off their nose to spite their face, then we'll go straight to WTO rules.
Will you let me say something?
Well, I've been trying, but you keep asking me questions. Right, move on, Barry. Tell me.
Right, okay. If there's no deal and we go to WTO rules, there are 164 member countries in the WTO, big countries and small countries. And if we try to put a trade deal to the WTO, and and they say it's too advantageous to Britain and detrimental to them, they can veto it. You don't tell your people that, do you?
Barry,
any one of those countries can veto it.
Barry, we're the fifth or sixth biggest economy in the world. The WTO will be delighted to have us as a standalone member. Of course they will.
Like India are fast catching up because they're investing for the long term and we're not.
Barry, most trade that is done across the world is done on WTO rules. All right? Now, personally, I don't think we need to go to that. I mean, no deal, no problem. But for 20 years, Barry, I've been told by Commissioner Kinnock, as he then was, by Giscard d'Estaing, and right on to Barnier today and Donald Tusk, that if all the UK wants is a simple free trade deal, we can have it. Why don't we just go for that?
And let's be honest, why are we having Brexit anyway? It's because the EU is bringing forward a cast iron anti-tax dodging legislation, and you guys, people I'm not saying you personally, but people you know, like Rees-Mogg, have set up financial offices in Dublin to get around it. You guys don't want to be paying tax.
It was the creation of the European Economic Area that allowed companies to choose which domicile they pay corporation tax in. You could actually argue the European structures have helped the big firms dodge tax and not the other way around. Barry, you've had a fair go. You're not happy, I can tell. Let's go to Clapham and speak to James. Hi, James.
Hi, Nigel. I'm sure Barry's got a case of O'Brienitis, inflammation at the Liberal mind there. We'll go on. We'll go on.
The great thing about having a proper, open debate with the public, and I think LBC is the only place in British broadcasting that does it, is everyone's entitled to have a view, as long as they're vaguely polite, James, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Nigel. Moving on to the Northern Ireland issue now. Myself, I don't know if you see this, is if it wasn't Northern Ireland, it would have been Gibraltar, but Spain basically kicked themselves in the behind when they went into Catalonia, so they couldn't use Gibraltar, so they moved across to Northern Ireland. Now, Mr Barnier and the Republic needs to understand that if the people in Northern Ireland are called unionists for a reason, if you try to separate them and keep them in the customs union, then what's going to happen is we're going to go back to the Troubles. So, are they going to actually go and say, yeah, no problems, we're going to do that? Because the Republic of Ireland has a lot to say in Northern Ireland anyway, with the Northern Ireland Agreement. Why do they need any more?
Well, I mean, I think I agree with that. Although I will say this, James, just bear this in mind. All this talk about the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement, the European Union played pretty much zip in terms of role in that. The Americans were the brokers, if anybody else. And when I hear Lord Peter Hain and others saying that if we have a border in Northern Ireland, it could lead to an outburst of republicanism and violence, I almost feel, if there are some on the Remain side, virtually encouraging that.
Yeah, I agree. Nigel, do you know what this reminds me of? If we look across the pond to what's happening with the Democrats, it's exactly what's happening with the Remain issue. They will not accept the result. Nope. They will try and do any dirty tricks to undermine it.
And they have been driven literally mad by it, deranged by it, James. James, I've got to move on. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 6:45. Well, Mrs May's common statement has gone down pretty much like a lead balloon. The Eurosceptics can't stand it. Even the Remainers don't like it. The idea we're going to be stuck for years in a customs union. That's what she wants. She views the fact the EU were considering it as positive progress. Wow. It's not good. Jason says, evening, Nigel. It was all highly predictable. There was never going to be a consensus around any of the deals discussed, whether Canada, Norway or Chequers. As we all know, no deal is economic Armageddon. No, it isn't, Jason, unless you work for the BBC or someone like that. Big report out today from Open Europe saying that with WTO terms and us having the ability to reduce tariffs on food, on bras, on shoes, on all sorts of things, that actually, between now and 2030, there would be almost no economic effect at all. And, you know, I heard it would be economic Armageddon if we didn't join the euro. Thank goodness we didn't listen to that. And Chris quite sensibly says, let's leave first. If they want to deal later, when reality sinks in, fair enough. Deal from a position of strength. Always maintain the upper hand. And what's happened with this is our civil service have conceded, boxed themselves into a corner with the Prime Minister last December, with the massive concession of the backstop on Northern Ireland, and we have been losing ever since. Let's go to Belfast and speak to Eamon, a new caller to this show. Eamon, all the talk is about Northern Ireland.
It is, Nigel. I'd like to inform you a wee bit more about Northern Ireland and some of the things you've come out with. 2 or 3 minutes ago, you said the EU has done zilch to the Northern Ireland peace process.
That's right.
Right. Well, I live here, and I know for a fact there was millions of pounds poured in peace funding to Northern Ireland to facilitate community groups, to facilitate discussions, to lay the groundwork and lay the foundations for the peace process here. And for you to come on and say they've done zilch, I think is... It just shows, you know, the lack of knowledge, basically.
Well, let me give you some knowledge then, Eamon, shall we? What happened was Tony Blair brokered, concluded the Belfast Agreement with huge help from the Americans, Senator Mitchell, if you remember, and then, very much as an afterthought, wrote the European Union into it. What you talk about as peace funding, well, the fact is the European Union has, although it's changed a bit now with lots of new countries coming in, but the European Union has been taking our money but giving it back to some of the poorer regions. My point is, Eamon, the European Union was not involved in those negotiations.
Ourselves included. We were net beneficiaries in Northern Ireland, weren't we?
Well, you know what? Some parts of the UK were beneficiaries, but overall the country was a massive loser.
Yeah, and I would lay money on it that we wouldn't have been net beneficiaries if the likes of yourself had been in charge.
Well, you know something, Eamon? One of the objects of EU regional policy was to break down cohesiveness within nations. Tony Benn predicted this back in 1975. He said, if we stay part of the common market, you'll soon see Scotland trying to separate. So it's been a very deliberate policy. But anyway, Eamon, we are where we are. But when I say that already there are big differences between Northern Ireland and the Republic, that effectively there already is a border, do you accept that point?
Not particularly. I have an Irish passport, Nigel. I see myself as Irish.
Yeah.
My family see themselves as Irish. And, you know, a while ago we were entitled to claim that. You know, that was part of the brokerage. I'm recognised. Hey, yourselves and your government as an Irish citizen, I'm entitled to claim that. The frightening thing, and I know, Nigel, frightening thing, I think, from the unionist point of view, I've worked with unionists. I worked with a fellow, and I've worked with him for 8 or 9 years, who would have been staunchly unionist. He phoned me a couple of weeks ago, him and his wife and his kids have just ordered Irish passports. And I think as a nationalist or someone who wants to unite Ireland long term, we're in a no-lose situation here. We either stay in the EU and join more with our Irish colleagues, or we go hard Brexit and we alienate a lot of what you would call soft unionists, the people that want to integrate, the people that want to send their kids, you know, over to Europe and places like that. I think we're no lose. It's very interesting. Sinn Féin have been so quiet this last while.
Well,
very quiet.
What a bizarre situation, Eamon. I mean, we mustn't spend too long on this because it's very Irish specific, but I shared a platform with Mary Lou MacDonald, now the leader of Sinn Féin, and we sat together on a platform during the second referendum. Why there were two, I don't know, but there we are, on the Lisbon Treaty. And in those days, Sinn Féin wanted an independent, united Ireland away from Belfast, away from Westminster and away from Brussels. They've kind of changed their position, Eamon, but you almost get the feeling they're almost embarrassed about it.
They're letting the DUP do the work for them at the minute. Arlene Foster, I as a nationalist and would have been quite happy with the status quo when we had Ian Paisley and Peter Robinson in charge. Arlene Foster is just driving, sort of soft nationalism and soft unionism away. Very, very dangerous game she's playing. And, there's talk over 10 MPs. At the minute, it's only 9 because Junior's suspended.
No, he's back now. He's back now, isn't he?
He's not back. He's not back. He's not back.
What's he got? What's he got, a week left or whatever?
So he's not back. Nigel, you need to get your facts right. He's not back to the end of
He was suspended for... Look, let's not split hairs, Eamon.
Nigel.
Let's not...
13 days. No, but don't split hairs. But if you're going to say he's back and he's not back, you know,
right,
you need to be clear.
Right, this is not a Belfast call-in. They've got 10 MPs. If there was a general election...
So they have 9 at the minute.
Oh,
if there was a vote in Brexit tomorrow, they would have 9. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, all right, Eamon, I get the point. Thank you. Once you start with Arden, you can never, ever get away. We could be there for several years, as British politics was in historical times gone past. Simon is calling from Basingstoke. Simon, is she going to get a deal?
No, she won't get a deal. And to be frank, I think even if she'd been a much better negotiator, she wouldn't have got a deal. The EU cannot give the UK a good deal. And we should have accepted that from the start. I voted leave. I think we should leave under WTO rules. And as one of your earlier callers made a great mistake. When you start under WTO rules, you set a schedule which sets your tariffs and also sets quotas and establishes the state aid you can provide your industries. That deal is in force until everybody agrees it. So if if we can't get full agreement, we can continue to trade under that schedule as long as we wish.
Yeah. Someone said to me, almost getting approval doesn't matter. You just do it.
Exactly, and that's the two things Theresa May should do if she's really desperate for a deal. Is one public and one private. Publicly, she should publish our proposed WTO schedule. As I say, that doesn't just set tariffs, that sets quotas. Set the quotas for all goods from EU countries with whom we're running a net trade deficit at 50% of the current levels.
Yeah.
And then privately, she should speak to the Prime Minister of Ireland and say the first act of a government once we've left the EU is to end the 1922 free travel area agreement so that Irish people won't be able to pop over to the UK when economic conditions in Ireland are bad. And let's see how anti a deal the Irish Prime Minister is when he has to provide full employment to his people.
None of those things, none of that getting tough is ever going to happen, Simon, all the while Theresa May is Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. Strong passions on this subject. It's going to dominate everything for the course of the next week and more. I absolutely don't want a deal on these terms, although if it goes back to Parliament, they'd probably give us a second referendum. Boy, she's put us in a mess. Darryl suggests, what about a truce for Christmas? Play some football or something. Not a bad idea. I'm back tomorrow night at 6. At 10 this evening, it's Tom Swarbrick. But up next, it's Ian Dale.
Thank you very much, Nigel.